Hi, good evening, and welcome back to today's daily newspaper analysis. So let's make a start with the Indian Express today. The first piece of news we have is about the Strait of Hormuz. The last few days have had relatively lesser pieces of news. The last few days of the ceasefire between the US and Iran. And there have been recriminations. US has said things, Iran has said things in return. Trump, of course, continues to claim that the agreement is almost reached. Iran says we haven't really finalized things. There are talks of the Islamabad talks, the second round, which are set to happen. It's unclear who will be representing the US side. So, amid all of those things, the newspaper reports that in a bid to bypass the Strait of Hormuz choke point, Gulf countries scramble to ramp up infrastructure, right? So they're looking for alternative routes, either through pipelines or other maritime points through which they can do the all important export of their oil, LPG, etc., etc. Okay, there are other pieces of news. The Express is investigating the SIR, the Special Intensive Revision. As you know, state elections are going on. It is rather unfair that the appeals of so many voters are still pending, and yet the electoral rolls for the West Bengal Vidhan Sabha elections have now been frozen. All right. Okay. Moving forward, the next important piece of news is an observance today. Okay. This observance is the Civil Services Day that you see at the bottom here. So remember, the 21st of April, 2026 is the National Civil Services Day in India. Okay. How do we understand this? So why the 21st of April? Because on this date, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel had given a famous speech to the probationers at that time. And in that speech, he referred to the bureaucracy or the civil services of India as the steel frame of India. Okay, so who said it? Sardar Patel, about whom the civil service or bureaucracy. What did he call them? The steel frame of India. And what is the date? It is today's date, the 21st of April, 2026. Okay, so it's the famous steel frame speech that is commemorated by the observance of the National Civil Services Day in India on the 21st of April. Okay, so I hope this is absolutely clear. Usually, of course, we do not do the political news, but as you know, the election campaign in Tamil Nadu is ongoing. The election campaign in West Bengal is also ongoing. And in the midst of those election campaigns, last week's session of Parliament continued, where the Women's Reservation Bill, bundled with the Delimitation Bill, was discussed, and that constitution amendment, which sought to increase the number of seats in Lok Sabha and conduct a sudden delimitation, was defeated by the opposition because this proposal failed to achieve the required special majority as mandated by Article 368 of the Constitution dealing with amendments, right? What is that majority required to pass a constitution amendment? It is two-thirds majority of those who are present and voting and a simple majority of the total membership of the House. And that kind of majority has to be attained in each House while fulfilling both conditions. Okay. Moving forward, we aren't going to look into some of the high-profile sort of political legal news. There is some dispute about the citizenship of Rahul Gandhi, where a BJP leader has filed a petition in the Allahabad High Court, suggesting that Rahul Gandhi has the citizenship of the United Kingdom, and so on and so forth. So there is, a judge of the Allahabad High Court had ordered that there be an investigation into the matter. But after that, it was realized that no notice and opportunity of hearing was given to Rahul Gandhi. And so the judge proceeded to have hearings to decide whether to give a hearing. In the meanwhile, there were allegations made against the judge, and so he has recused from hearing the case. You should know the meaning of the word recuse. Recuse, when we use this word in context of judges, it means that the judge has withdrawn himself from the case, from hearing the case, usually due to some sort of conflict of interest. Okay, so I hope that is absolutely clear. All right. Okay. It is being reported today that India and Ukraine are in the process of a security cooperation agreement. So we shall look at the details of the same once we have them, once this agreement is finalized. Okay. As you know, India has very close ties with the Russian Federation as well. So it will certainly be akin to walking a tightrope for India, finalizing this kind of security cooperation agreement with Ukraine in the midst of the Russo-Ukrainian war. Okay, so please keep that in mind. The president's name, of course, is Zelensky. Believe it or not, many years ago, Clat, one of Clat or Alat, asked the name of the president of Ukraine. Okay, moving forward, let's go ahead to the editorial pages. Okay, and the Indian Express, their editorial board, calls upon Iran and the US to extend their ceasefire. Remember, the ceasefire was there in place for 2 weeks, and it's about to come to an end. There are recriminations. As part of the ceasefire, Iran first announced that we have opened the Strait of Hormuz. Trump said, great, the Strait of Hormuz is open, but we will not stop our blockade of the Strait of Hormuz till a final deal with Iran is done. That, of course, led to Iran announcing that the Strait of Hormuz is shut again. And in the midst of that, it is again unclear if the world, and especially Iran, will be pushed into a state of war and a loss of life. So this is something to keep an eye out on, and it will certainly be the most important news in the next couple of days. Okay, I hope that is absolutely clear. Okay, an important editorial by Srinivas Goli about the recent actions sought to be taken by the union government, and he talks about here that there is no real need of increasing the number of Lok Sabha MPs. It is simply about better representation for women, right? He argues that it really doesn't matter how many MPs there are. It's about the representation of women among however many number of MPs exist at any given point of time. That is also the argument of the opposition, and the government explicitly linked the increase of seats from the current maximum, which is 550, to a new maximum, which is 850. The government explicitly linked this to the idea that it will not cause a loss for existing male members of parliament, which sort of gives away the entire game. Okay. Moving forward, as you all know, as per the World Economic Outlook of the International Monetary Fund, India has slipped to 6th place in terms of GDP. But the Indian Express argues that it's about the reform agenda, and we should not really be focused on the ranking. Of course, much was made when India rose in the rankings, and so we must also take note of India's fall. Of course, the war in Iran has heavily impacted these rankings. What you must remember is that the International Monetary Fund is the one which publishes the World Economic Outlook, and the IMF is headquartered in Washington, DC. It is the IMF and World Bank together which are known as the Bretton Woods sisters, because they came out of the Bretton Woods conferences. Okay. So I just wanted to take that opportunity to flag details about the International Monetary Fund. Now, there is an article in today's paper about the sacrilege law passed by Punjab. Now, we won't go into the politics of this because it's been written by a political leader. But I did want to discuss the meaning of this word, sacrilege. Another related word is blasphemy, right? So both of these words, sacrilege and blasphemy, relate to doing actions which violate or harm the religious feelings and the religious codes of a particular religion. Okay? So sacrilege specifically will be about showing the symbols or books of a particular religion in a negative light, maybe destroying the book or burning the book. All of those would fall within the definition of sacrilege. So the context is that the Punjab legislature recently passed a law increasing punishments for sacrilege against the Guru Granth Sahib, which is the 11th and eternal Guru in Sikhism. Okay? All right. Moving forward, the next piece of news that we need to focus on is, of course, from the explained section. Okay. One of the best articles today is by Anil Sasi, who writes that the West Asia disruptions prompt a shift of fuel supply. Okay. So here they're talking about how Asia has been dependent, all of Asia, India, South Korea, Japan, China, dependent on the Gulf nations, and specifically dependent on the maritime choke point of the Strait of Hormuz for their oil and gas needs. So in this article, he talks about the alternatives that various countries are looking for. For example, India has bought oil from Russia in the midst of this crisis. One individual I want to flag for you who is mentioned in this article is the executive director of the International Energy Agency. His name is Fatih Barol. Okay, so I do want you to remember his name. Remember, the International Energy Agency is located in Paris. All right. Moving forward, as I said at the top, recriminations between Trump and Iran. Trump saying there is a deal, Iran saying we will not submit to a deal by force. Trump talking out of both sides of his mouth, saying on one hand that there is a deal, and on the other saying that he will attack Iran if they don't agree. Okay. And hanging in the middle are the Islamabad talks. And it's unclear whether they are happening. It's unclear who is going to attend those talks. It is absolutely unclear whether the ceasefire will hold, whether the 14-day ceasefire will hold. Okay. As you know, on the side, Israel and Lebanon talks were happening in Washington, D.C. in the United States, and a ceasefire had also been announced. There is now discussion of when these talks will resume, and there are some indications that these talks will resume in a couple of days. One point I wanted to make relating to this earthquake, when they say 7.7 earthquake, on what scale are we talking? So earthquakes are measured on the Richter scale. So remember, questions like this can come in especially ALET, but also in other law entrance exams like MHCET, PUCET, and so on and so forth. Okay. Moving forward, the economy section, of course, focusing on the impact of the war on inflation and relating to the fuel dependency of Asian countries on the Gulf nations. Okay, so nothing which we need to specifically look at in today's economic section. Similarly, for the sports section as well, there's nothing very significant in today's newspaper. Okay, so I hope this is absolutely clear. One point which I do want to mention is the 95th Indian Grandmaster, and his name is Aronyak Ghosh. Okay, as you know, of late there has been a spree of Indian grandmasters, especially young grandmasters. In fact, the 93rd, 94th, and 95th have all been youngsters. The latest, of course, the 95th is Aronyak Ghosh. The 94th and 93rd were Mayank Chakrabarti, and before that, Arav Dengla. Okay, as you all know, the latest Clat 2026 asked a whole 6 question set on the game of chess. Coming now to the Hindu, the front page, of course, focusing on the war between USA, Iran, and Israel, talking about the uncertainty in terms of the talks, which we have discussed in the Indian Express as well. Right? So you see here it mentions that Iran is undecided on talks, and Trump has said we are going to maintain the blockade. Right? Whereas Iran agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz, Trump now said that the US is going to continue its naval blockade. So that, of course, has caused a huge problem in the midst of the 14-day ceasefire, which is about to end. Okay. Moving forward, the Supreme Court has demanded a report from the High Court on the functioning of the tribunals relating to the special intensive revision. Okay. Once again, the census of 2027 is ongoing. It began on the 1st of April 2026. We have done the details of this, but I'll just ask you one question. Mention down in the comments who the mascots of the census of 2027 are. It is one male and one female human. And what I want are the names of these two individuals. Okay. So put them down in the chat if you are watching this video. Okay. Then, as you all know, usually we skip all of the news which relates to elections or the stances of political parties. Okay. So moving forward, let's go on to the editorial pages directly. And what we see here, once again, is an article by the former chairman of Indian Oil about the strategic vulnerability. Right? When we say that a person is vulnerable, it means he is open to the effect of something. Okay. Vulnerability with regard to our LPG supply. LPG, of course, stands for liquefied petroleum gas. Please remember all of the important short forms: LPG, CNG, LNG, and PNG. If you don't know any of them, do Google them and mention it down in the comments. Moving forward, the next important piece of news is in the text and context section of the Hindu. This is usually an excellent deep dive. And what it shows us is an article on US power and Latin American resistance. Okay. Now, what we see here, what is the biggest action taken by the United States under Donald Trump against a country in Latin America? Okay. It was, of course, the action against Venezuela, right? The kidnapping and abduction of their president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife, Celia Flores, right? So in the midst of all of that, what this article talks about is the opposition being faced by the United States from Latin American countries. We have also seen in the midst of the war against Iran, led by the US and Israel, a huge resistance building up in Europe, right? A whole bunch of NATO allies of the United States have refused access to their airspaces for the US to continue its bombing campaign against Iran. Okay, so please do keep that in mind. Moving forward, let's go ahead and skip these, political news stories. Let's go ahead and take a look at a recent visit by the National Security Advisor to Riyadh, which is Saudi Arabia. Our National Security Advisor, of course, is Mr. Ajit Doval. He has been for a long time. And India, of course, is making an outreach. Over the last weeks, the Minister of External Affairs, S. Jaishankar, has also gone on a visit to most of the Gulf countries. All right. And so this is significant. It's part of the outreach to the Gulf countries being undertaken by the government in the midst of the war by the United States and Israel against Iran. Okay. The business section has nothing we need to take a look at today. Now, interestingly, you see here, there is supposedly a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, and yet the US military is warning residents to stay out of certain areas lest they be the subject of bombings. Okay, so I hope this is absolutely clear. Israel has proved to be an unreliable actor, of course, playing a leading role in beginning these wars against Iran and Lebanon, but also in its behavior as part of the ceasefire agreements. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Moving forward, once again, I'm flagging for you the new latest Grandmaster, the 95th Grandmaster. All right. So I hope that is crystal clear. Okay, so that's all for today. We have taken a look at most of the important news stories from the day. And thank you for tuning in. Good night and goodbye.